Welcome, everybody, to Crossing the Line, where we dig into the latest news on the economy, housing, and whatever else Hannah's got on her list. Today's December 11th. It's been a really rainy last 24 hours here in New York City, but I think it's drying up. And this is our 6th episode. What episode? I know they have like anniversaries at different milestones. What do you get for your 6th episode?
A pat on the back.
Okay. From who?
Ray.
Oh, Ray is the glue. We say it all the time. Without him, it would just be two people talking in a room. I'm Greg Heym, Chief Economist at Brown Harris Stevens, and joined as always with my co-pilot Hannah and the great Lena and Ray in the background, randomly shouting things. You're not allowed to clap for yourself, Ray. We're coming to you as always from the beautiful Studio 1873, located here at 445 Park Avenue, right outside my office. Our goal, as always, is to be informative, concise, entertaining, and edgy all at the same time. Now, what is FanDuel's latest odds on that actually happening? Because FanDuel, you can gamble on anything. Did they say, like, which of those goals is Greg going to hit this week? Or?
I really couldn't say.
Okay, well, that's good. You know how I feel about gambling. You know, I just a reminder about the email address. We're not really getting feedback, which scares me a bit because we could just assume everything's perfect. But ctl@bhsusa.com. That's ctl@bhsusa.com.
They say no news is good news, but I mean...
Yeah, not when it comes to...
But not when it comes to that. So submit your questions if you have any.
I get a couple different things about feedback. And this is from my family and alleged close friends. One is, does it have to be so much about economics? And I said, that's the whole point. They go, we like the other stuff better. When I was showing this to my family, my wife is actually dozing off during the first part because she doesn't find it as exciting.
That's okay.
I also get complaints that could we make it a little bit shorter because they don't want to commit to like 40 or 45 minutes. People can't, you think about a Twitter world, like everybody's about very quick, short stuff. And the other thing I get is not enough Hannah. You're a huge hit in the Long Island jazz community. There's a lot of old jazz musicians in Long Island.
And to the Long Island jazz community, I say thank you.
They love you. And
it means everything to me.
Not so much me. So how was your weekend, Hannah?
It was great. A little rainy, but I had a nice weekend. What about you?
Well, the Rangers almost ruined it by the shellacking they took on Wednesday, but a good win yesterday. And the Jets actually won. Hooray.
Yes.
And I had an okay gig on Saturday night. It was all right.
What made it just okay?
My thumb was hurting a little bit, and crowd could have been a little bit better. But you know what? That's what happens when you're a working musician. Stop laughing, Ray. What did you do this weekend that was so exciting?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay, that's
the best.
You spent the weekend preparing for this podcast. Lena, good weekend?
Yeah, I hosted some Italian gambling at my house. Italian bingo.
Oh, I was going to say,
sounds
so you're
fun.
admitting to criminal activity here on my podcast.
No.
This isn't a crime podcast. This is economics. We only accept real, securities fraud and other economic-related crimes.
Right.
So anyway, let's earn our pay. Not that we get paid for this, right?
We don't need to. This is a passion project.
Okay. Are you okay? You seem a little too excited to be here this morning. Is that right, huh?
Hey, since when was that a crime?
I don't know, but we'll be very happy for that because we need all the energy that we can get. So let's get to the headlines. Big employment report on Friday. Employment up by 199,000 jobs in November. Unemployment rate down from 3.9 to 3.7. So that was better than forecast. There was anywhere from 180 to 190 jobs expected, and the unemployment rate was expected to stay at 3.9. So it's good on that regards. It's better than expected. It's great news for people that found jobs during the month, but not the best news for the housing market and borrowing rates. We'll get to that in a little bit. And that, like any other economic data, and my job as an economist is to not let anybody get too happy about anything. So, 199,000 jobs gained, that sounds good considering we've had this unbelievable run, unprecedented run of hiring since we got out of the pandemic. But let's add a little more clarity, a little more focus to that number. About 40,000 of that was due to the return of workers from strikes, most notably auto strikes and motion picture industry too. It's great that this. I have to explain to my mother why new episodes of Blue Bloods are going to take till February. You know what I'm saying, Ray? It's not the best news I've had to deliver. The unemployment rate decline was due primarily to, and it's going to lead to a really technical, boring discussion, but I'll try to make it brief, was due to a 747,000 jump in the employment numbers in the household survey. So what's a household survey? Well, there are two surveys that are used to amalgamate this data. One is something we call the establishment or payroll survey. That's when they send out requests for companies for how many people are working here, and they get all that data. It's the larger of the two surveys by far, and that information is used to give us the headline jobs number, how many jobs were created last month, and wage information. The household survey is what's used to derive the unemployment rate. They call Lena up and they go, "Are you working?" And she says, "Yes, that's good." If she says no, the next question is, well, are you looking for work? Because if you're not looking for work, you're not unemployed. You have to be looking. So they also derive a gain in employment from the prior month, which, as you can tell, they got 747,000. The payroll survey got 199,000. Some people would say the answer is somewhere in between. I don't buy that. They're notoriously very apart from each other. Some people look at the household survey. Obviously, it's a much smaller survey, so that would lead to larger variations of the data. But it does capture some things the payroll survey doesn't. Like if Hannah starts her own business, Hannah's what kind of business are you going to start if you start a business?
I'll crochet scarves and gloves.
All by yourself?
And yeah.
Now,
and
do you do that?
Other accessories.
Do you do that while you're in the rocking chair, or does that come later as you get older?
Good one.
And can you crochet a sweater for me?
Sorry, crocheting is a timeless hobby. So the slander on crocheting, please don't limit it to the elderly.
I've cost myself a scarf apparently too. So the household survey has that advantage that it will catch the newer companies that are being formed that aren't yet on the payroll survey. But anyway, I guess what you need to know is that leave it to the economists to confuse everybody by having two surveys that sometimes don't add up. So if you take what the payroll survey, 199,000 jobs added last month, 49,000 of those were government jobs. So exclude those, we're down to 150. You exclude the people coming back from the strikes, and you're down to about 110,000. So that's the negative side of the report, that it's not as good as the headline appears, but isn't that always true? Some other interesting findings, every time they release a report, they revise the prior 2 months' data. So the September and October data was revised downward by 35,000 jobs. For 2 months, that's a very small revision. That's not that bad. Wages, which are really the important parts of the inflation puzzle, because hiring doesn't necessarily translate into inflation. Remember, it's too much money chasing not enough goods. Wages were up 0.4% in November, whereas CPA was flat in November. And the annual rate of growth in wages, 4%, also higher than the annual change in CPI. So the rate of wage growth has been declining, but luckily for Americans, the rate of price growth has declined even more. So that means that we all have more purchasing power. So we're all going to go out and splurge on something after we record the show. Another thing we look at is something called the JOLTS report, and it has nothing to do with electrocution or anything like that. Job openings and labor turnover survey from my old employers, the BLS, which showed that while down significantly, the number of job openings is still just under 9 million. That's an enormously high number. So even with all this hiring going on, companies still need officially 8.73 million workers. So let's hope they find them. So what does this mean for the Fed? We always say that this is a big report for the Fed, and it certainly is. It's certainly not a strong enough report. The Fed has a meeting this week. We talked briefly about that last week. They're not going to hike rates at the meeting this week. This isn't a scary report. But then again, it's also strong enough that forget talking about rate cuts. There's been a lot of talk about rate cuts. We don't want to hear it anymore. We talked last week, that Jerome Powell was kind of saying, stop it. We don't even want to hear about rate cuts.
Right.
They just did a survey of economists that don't expect any change in rates until July at the earliest. So just think how much nicer the weather will be in July. And my niece is getting married in July.
Congratulations to your niece.
Yes, Rachel and Adam, very nice couple. They're moving to Buffalo. And they're claiming they're going to become Bills fans. So right away I have to not like that aspect of it. But Rachel's not really.
Didn't they have a big win over the weekend against?
They did. They beat the Chiefs.
Yeah. Upset.
It's what's the thing about football? Yeah. And I have a brother who lives right outside of Dallas, and they beat the Eagles.
Wow.
So there you go. So anyway, get back to this. Talk about rate cuts. Let's stop being so greedy, people. We want. Inflation is moving down. Remember, it's still 2% target. We're still almost double that, the annual rate of inflation. Looks like we're going to get the soft landing without the recession, the soft landing being when the Fed brings rates up enough to slow the economy down, that inflation is under control, but we don't go into recession. So just be happy with that. As you always used to say when we took Gregory to like Wendy's or whatever, and he'd get a toy, and you always say you get what you get and you don't get upset.
Right.
Now, that being said, one time I did bribe somebody behind a Wendy's counter because they were giving out Christmas gifts and all he wanted was the train and he wasn't getting it. And I may have bribed somebody to make sure he got the train.
That was a good dad move.
Yeah, until the other kids in Wendy's were like, we didn't get the train.
Yeah.
Where's the train? I felt a little
You're like,
bad.
slip them a $5 bill, they'll give you one.
Yeah, Well, you could buy a better train probably than fun. So the bottom line here is labor market outperforming expectations. Still great for people, and it's great that companies are hiring, and we want everybody to have a job that wants one. But it's not very good for rates, particularly mortgage rates, which is our segue to the next story. This takes a little bit of the joy out of this next headline, knowing that rates are probably going to tick up a little bit. But last week they did fall for the sixth straight week. The average 30-year conforming mortgage rate fell to a little over 7% from 7.22% the prior week. Now, my good buddy Steve Kligerman likes to email me saying, stop talking about conforming rates. Our business is in jumbo and arms. This is a national show, Steve. But I will point out that you should always check what rates are relevant to your situation. But the general direction of rates stays the same regardless of whether they're jumbo or mortgage. Jumbo rates do tend to be lower than conforming these days, depending on your credit score. So rates have declined for 6 weeks in a row, falling almost 0.75%. That's in a month and a half. That's pretty noticeable decline in rates. And 6 weeks ago, they actually hit a 23-year high. So we've seen this decline. And I tell you, you see what it does to contract activity, which is here in Manhattan perking up. But November was the worst November for contracts signed to buy apartments in Manhattan since November of 2005.
Wow.
And you can blame a lot of that on the fact that rates surged into mid-October and hit that 23-year high. So to you buyers out there, keep your eyes on the rates. You're probably doing that, but you want to look for any chance to save. This jobs report is a bump in the road, but rates are heading in the right direction. And again, the reason the jobs report will potentially cause mortgage rates to go up, or most likely cause mortgage rates to go up, is mortgages are about the future. And anytime the future starts to look rosier than people thought, more jobs added, more spending, then you'll see the expectations for future inflation go up, which will bring long-term rates higher. If I'm going to lend Hannah money for a couple months, I'm not really worried about the rate. But for 30 years, I don't want to lend her the money at 3% and then rates, a year or two from now are at 6%, and then I really feel like I made a mistake. Not lending you money, but not charging you higher. So keep looking at the rates with inventory so low in so many of the markets out there. Your only chance to say prices aren't going down in most parts of the United States. So lower rates are really your only chance and best opportunity to make your purchase more affordable. So keep in touch with your mortgage people and your real estate agents out there. This week is a big one for economic data. We have the PI brothers, the CPI and the PPI, Consumer Price Index and Producer Price Index. We also have retail sales, and for dessert, we have a Fed meeting. Now, the Fed meeting is going to be a nothing burger, like what Ray eats, because he's a vegan. He eats like a wish sandwich where you have 2 pieces of bread and you wish you could put meat in there. See, Ray's laughing at it. No, you can't. Ray's laughing. It's funny.
No, it is.
So that is the economic news. Now to everybody's favorite part of the show. Yes. And, everybody always gets excited about this part, of course, because it means a little less me. But, we were calling this Hannah stuff. You had an assignment to come up with
there's
a
a little
better
dispute
name.
going on here. You assigned me the task of coming up with a segment name, thinking about the title of our podcast, thinking about, just what feels right. And I would like to call it The Lineup because we have some articles and we have a good lineup of them. You didn't like that.
Well, because how much can we abuse the word line in all of this stuff?
It's
I'm surprised we
punny.
haven't drawn a line on the table, a line on
It
the
just
wall.
makes sense to me.
There are too many lines in my life. I'm a musician, so I have a staff has 5 lines on it that I look at.
Then you should love it.
No, it's got to be.
What would you suggest?
Well, you could say Hannah's lineup. At least put yourself into it. As a sign behind you says, Greg Heym's crossing the line.
So this is my lineup.
We got a Hannah's lineup or Hannah's highlights. I know that's terrible, but
cheesy.
Come on. This.
I'm sticking with the lineup.
Okay, if you wanna.
You're gonna have to just pick your battles on this one. You know what I mean? All right. So
I've been married for 25 years. I'm quite familiar with that. concept.
No.
I'm also a parent of a 16-year-old, so I do get it. And by the way, Ron Guidry gets it too. And I got Gator here because I have to have him there.
Moving on. The first article on the line, today's lineup. So according to a trend forecast done by Glassdoor, Gen Z could overtake boomers in the workforce in 2024.
Well, that's inevitable, right? Because baby boomers are the minimum, I think, in their 60s or approaching 60. So that the aging thing, just eventually they'll overtake my generation, which is a lot cooler.
But this is important because the change in demographic causes a shift in what employers will prioritize.
Right, and this is the generation that baby boomers grew up in the aftermath of World War II and a boom in this country, which I think made them more optimistic, at least when they were younger. Maybe that changes as you get older, but I think the Gen Z, a lot of them growing up like my son, around sort of unprecedented turmoil, they think. Again, I tell my son, read your history textbook. We had a civil war in this country. We've had our founding fathers. A lot of them hated each other. We've always had turmoil. And you want to blame the social media or whatever. We joked about if John Adams and Jefferson had Twitter, how cool that would have been.
Yeah, catastrophic.
So they grew up in that, and also COVID, which basically took 2 years of their life and made them, go to school for a big part of that time remotely, not see their friends.
Yeah. Activities
limited what they can do.
My sister had to go to her own graduation from high school, like on Zoom.
Yeah.
Not,
And, we can have a whole show about what we did wrong during COVID and the financial crisis. But, I want to stay in the air at least another week. And that would be the show where Greg crosses the line.
Correct.
You talk about the different values that they look for. See, baby boomers and even Gen Xers like myself, we just wanted a job. We wanted to work. We wanted an opportunity to prove ourselves. We wanted to do better than our parents, and our parents really lived for that. And, my parents didn't go to college, but all 4 of us did. 2 of us have advanced degrees, but I'm the smartest one. Yeah, my brothers will listen to this. The one that's a doctor, come on. What is he? It's different with Gen Z. They have different priorities. They are more concerned about social impact.
Creative opportunities.
Right. They with regardless of their experience or tenure, they want a big say. They want to be heard. You know, when you start working in the old days, everybody said, "Shut up, Greg. Like, we don't care what you think. Just go get the coffee or whatever menial." When I worked at BLS, I was doing a lot of copying and data entry when I started. So much for that fancy economics degree. But you did it because you paid your dues.
Right.
They don't want to pay their dues. They just want to go in and start running. Because we do have a lot of, you know, people that in their 20s created multi-billion-dollar companies. So they think that all pertains to them. And look, my son is Gen Z. I'm not picking on the generation.
As am I.
I tell him that you're lucky, your generation, because he's depressed about his generation. I said, that's good because you're competing against people who don't want to compete. When I got out of college, it was dog eat dog. You know, you were competing and everybody was hungry. Nowadays, it's like, you're not going to give it to me? Well, and look, we talked about, you know, Gen Z and people thinking they'll never make enough money to afford a home and stuff. I get those challenges. Look, I didn't buy my first house till I was 36. And, you know, life gives you opportunities and life gives you challenges. And I think this idea that everybody's entitled, and I think also a lot of these Gen Zers don't realize how hard, you know, I worked for the government, you know, in a nonprofit the first 11 years of my career, if you combine them in. I didn't work in the private sector until I was 33 when I came here 20 years ago. So you've got to earn it. You can't, you know, just come out of the box and like, okay, you should listen to everybody's opinion, but don't expect to be taken too seriously if you're right out of school. I mean, it's just the way it works. And they want to get more political at work, right?
Right.
And, you know, that's social media, I think, too. Just when I was younger, we didn't talk as much about politics in the nasty way we do now, but people still had, even when I was a little kid, they always said, don't talk religion and politics, you know.
In the
with
workplace
anybody.
or at dinner.
Right. And, you know, now it's like, don't talk about anything because it's just going to get ugly.
It's just going to cross the line.
Right. It's going to cross the line. And, you know, another thing.
Thanks, Ray.
The article mentioned is, you know, they're more concerned with this trade-off between work and leisure. It's like, leisure? Why? And this is going to come up later in another one of your pieces. But when does a company care about your leisure time? When did that happen? Alina's going, yeah. It's like, Ray, I'm concerned you're not having enough leisure activities outside of work. And no, it's like you don't have any thing to do outside of work. Come back into work. Well, we want that. So anyway, those are my random. Now you're a Gen Zer. You read this. What do you think? Talk about your generation, just like Roger Daltrey did almost 60 years ago.
I think that you've made some solid points. I think that what was most interesting about the article was that there was a point made that people in my generation want to see their companies stand on sides of like social justice issues, like what they would like to see companies taking a stand or voicing their opinions. I think that's interesting, and I think that's like definitely a new thing. But I don't know yet. I can't really say like.
Well, you saw a bit of the
but
danger in that. I'm not saying that, you know, corporations should be charitable and they should be concerned about things like the environment and injustice. But, you know, you look at the banking crisis that seems to have gone away. No one's talked about it for months. But a lot of the problems with SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, had to deal with wokeness and who they lent money to and sort of, you know, in the old days, banks were greedy people with monocles and big bags with dollar signs on them.
Like Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, you know, that kind of thing, and saying, you know, Cratchit, you're working through Christmas kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying they should be that way, but it's a fine line that you have to, you know, you can look at some of the campaigns that have hurt companies' sales.
True.
And so it's still a new concept because, in business school, you talk about the number one priority of a company should be to increase the value of the company,
Right.
and give a higher return to shareholders. But there are other things that need to be considered, and as companies are formed, more companies are formed by Gen Zers. We'll see if there's a change in that.
Yes, we will. Well, next on the lineup, J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon recently lashed out against Bitcoin. And to quote him, "If I was the government, I would shut it down."
Yeah, Jamie Dimon has always seemed as like the smartest. He's always put out there as the smartest guy in the street. Like he gets it. He originally a while back referred to Bitcoin as a hyped up fraud, and
Yes, he
compared
did.
it to a pet rock. Now Ray's old enough to remember the pet rock.
I remember well, I don't
You don't
remember it, but
remember
my mom would tell me that was all the rage.
If you've seen the movie Office Space,
Of
there's
course.
a mention of it. Like the guy made $1 million with a pet rock.
Yeah.
There's always a fad, thing that goes on. A lot of people have likened it to the tech bubble. People were buying .com stocks. They didn't even know what they did in the late 1990s, and they made money until all of a sudden they didn't. And, the funniest quote outside of if I was the government, I'd close it down, was, quote, "The only true use case for it is criminals, drug traffickers, money laundering, tax avoidance." So,
Old words.
and it's funny because they do have a presence, a pretty large presence in the blockchain space, which is all tied to cryptocurrencies. So, how much of that does he truly? Business is business, to a certain degree. I like out of the box things, but it just goes to what Ray had asked a question about this on the first episode about Bitcoin, and again, it just don't buy what you don't understand, and you'll typically be okay.
Wise words. I mean, he also said that crypto companies should face the same anti-money laundering regulations as major financial institutions as well.
Yeah, I used to work in a credit union as a teller, and there are all these. This was in the 80s and early 90s, but now it's even more so. And you look at how it even impacts real estate because the buyers have to be revealed in more transactions now than ever because people were accused of using real estate here in Manhattan to launder money.
Right.
So, there's always, and we've seen this with at least one cryptocurrency, they're ripe for fraud. I mean, they really are because they're not regulated probably to the extent they should be. And, the government always has to play catch up with this stuff. Even with Wall Street, think about credit default swaps. That's what really made the financial crisis as bad as it was. By the time I think the regulators figure out what it is, it's too late and the thing is blown up. So, and then they fix that and then they come up with a new product. And you want to say crypto is that product? Go ahead. But, Wall Street has a way to throw a big monkey wrench in the economy, usually at least once a decade, if not twice.
That is true. Well, this is definitely the highlight of my articles in the lineup. I don't know if you agree, but nearly 40% of hiring managers lie during job interviews.
Now, this is funny because, we
Interesting.
talked last week about how CoStar was saying there's going to be a shortage of office space and everybody does that fast cartoon take with go.
Yeah.
But
Can we get that as a soundbite now?
I'm sure Ray will take care of that. Yeah, it's like I thought it was the applicants that lie, not the people. I always when I was a little kid, when I was a youngin', my first job, when you're doing interviews, you're like, oh man, this person has so much power over me right now. I'm like ready to beg for this job. Of course, Gen Zers would never say that, but Gen Xers, we were like, please hire me. And
There are still some of us out there that are,
but then
we're not all like that.
But then you always say, I want to be on the other side of that desk when I grow up. Like, I want to be the person who's judging you and saying, why should I hire you? Not you, Hannah, but I'm saying in general. You think that makes it a lot of fun, but actually it does not. It's not a fun thing to do, especially when you're hiring people right out of college, which is the majority of the hiring I do. And trying to get a feel for them in half an hour or an hour is difficult.
Right.
And you know that they're embellishing to a certain degree. Some of that you can check, some of that you can't. So, but I've sweated during some some interviews that I've been conducting. Like
Really?
we were trying to hire a director of communications for a Halstead, one of the companies that was merged into BHS. And one of the people in marketing had recommended a great person. And she came in with a yellow notepad, like 4 pages of questions, and proceeded to interrogate me for like an hour.
That's great. I think it's important to come prepared.
Well, it's, you know what they would say, if you don't want to answer a question, answer a different question. But if you don't want to answer questions at all, go ask 50 of them yourself. And I felt like I should quit after that because she was brutal. Unfortunately, she didn't take the job, but
that was what you just said, the if you don't want to answer the question, ask another one. That loosely was one of the common deceptions that the article talked about, which employers will
dodge your questions. Yeah,
dodge questions.
Well, because one of the questions, so you come into my office because you want to work in research because it is the coolest department here at Brown Harris Stevens.
Totally.
And you say to me, like, where can I be in 5 years? I have no idea what that is. So it's like, I could be dead in 5 years and, you could have my job. Who knows? So you honestly don't know. And of course, hiring managers don't want to say, I don't know.
Right.
So, you have ways of answering that. So that is one way they lie. Another one is kind of talking in circles, but doesn't everybody do that?
Yes.
When they don't want to answer a question.
Roles, responsibilities. So what exactly does the job entail?
Right.
Like
and it's funny because as when you're interviewing somebody, you look for them to ask the questions they're not supposed to ask on a first interview. Like, how much vacation do I get? Or a lot of there was also an article this week about one question not to ask in a job interview if you're the interviewee is don't ask about work-life balance. Because we joked about it before, the company isn't, that's your problem. You figure that out. We're not here. I mean, some companies have, lounge areas and bean bags and other stuff to make you relax. I don't have any of that anywhere near my office. But so it's funny, though, that this article comes out because it's always, and the other thing they do is they discourage you from talking to other people. Like,
previous employees. I
would say, go ahead, talk to my staff. They love me. Just ask me. I'll tell you how much my staff loves me. So as a boss,
Greg's staff, please submit to CTL.
It's her flooding emails. Yeah. They want to be on next week's show. So as a boss, I can be both upset and with the story, and I can relate to it. Yes, I have, according to this, lied during an interview with somebody, and I apologize for that. But I figure they're probably lying to me a little bit, so maybe we're even at the end of
I think that those can be considered white lies, though. I mean, job interviews are very stressful, and, not everybody's so great on the spot.
I'm telling you, they're not as much fun as a boss as you think. And someday, when you're in that position, or if you're in that position, if you want to be, it's like, man, I thought this was going to be a lot cooler. It's kind of like being a parent. It's like, I have this living person in my house that I can tell them what to do and they have to listen. And you're like, no, it doesn't work that way. So.
Well, last but certainly not least.
Wait, this isn't last, second to last.
Second to last. Okay. Well, Norman Lear.
No, wait, the Forest Hills thing.
Oh, well.
Oh, I sent that.
You can get into that if you'd like.
It's going to be very quick. Charity Navigator, which is a good site. If you ever want to donate to an organization and you want to make sure most of the money is going to help the people they say it's going to help, or it's a reputable thing, Charity Navigator is always a good place to start. So you can also donate through that site. So they analyzed the donations over the last 2 years, and the most generous neighborhood in the United States is Forest Hills.
Very interesting.
We have an office.
Let's give it up for Forest Hills.
We have an office in Forest Hills, and to Jacques and everybody out there, congratulations for being so generous. And they're ranked by dollars per capita, and per capita really means per person, because obviously larger cities would give more in total than larger neighborhoods and smaller ones. So congratulations, Forest Hills. keep up the good work.
Yes.
Way to represent Queens.
Keep up the generosity.
So I knew once they reopened that tennis center, now they have concerts there.
Yes.
Do you know they used to have U.S. Open there?
Of course I know that.
Okay, back when it was on clay.
My dad worked for Fred Perry, which was a company that...
Fred Perry, the for the longest time, was the last British winner of Wimbledon until Andy Murray came along. So,
yeah, so he went to...
are you impressed with my knowledge of tennis? We didn't talk about this before, so...
Do you have a lot of knowledge about tennis?
I do, particularly 70s and 80s tennis. Look, when I was a kid, the two best players were American, and they were both left-handed, like myself, Connors and McEnroe.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I have been excited? You know, they hated each other. It was almost like a contact sport when they play. Now you got Nole out there doing amazing things. There's a piece on 60 Minutes I watched about him. He's really an amazing guy. The fact that he's pushing 40 and beating people half his age badly.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It just goes to show you. And it's funny, they mentioned his mental toughness. And the interviewer was basically saying, oh, you know, you're born with that. And he's like, no, you work on that.
He's a hard worker.
Mental toughness, what was, you know, to paraphrase Yogi Berra, he'd say baseball is, you know, 90% mental and the other half physical. You know, right? It was always something like that. But so many things in life are mental. The other great Yogi Berra, there's a great documentary on Netflix called Yogi It Ain't Over, which I could spend an hour
Is that
talking
recent?
about.
Did it come out recently?
Yeah, his granddaughter was watching the All-Star game a couple of years ago, and they brought out the fan-voted four greatest living ball players, and Yogi Berra was not one of them. And, I mean, the other players were all great. Mike Schmidt, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and Sandy Koufax. Can't say a bad thing about any of them. They're phenomenal. But the granddaughter was saying, well, my grandpa has 10 rings. Nobody else has 10 rings. That's more than MVPs. 10 rings is more than all the people there. He also has combined he also had 3 MVP awards. Nobody there had 3 MVP awards.
Wow.
So anyway, one of his sayings was, if you can't imitate somebody, don't copy them. Or it's the other way around. Whatever it was. But the more you look at his stuff.
Sounds right.
No, the more you look at his stuff and you laugh at it first, it's really profound. It's profound. It's dead on. Like he is on a different level. And people laughed at him because he was short. Do you know how he got the name Yogi?
No, share.
When he played, you know, baseball as a kid, they didn't have dugouts and benches, so they would sit on the ground. And he would sit there with his legs crossed and his arms crossed and look like a yogi, you know, a religious figure.
Interesting.
So it's not from Yogi Bear. There's a lot of dispute whether Yogi Bear was kind of derived from him, but I digress. But don't I always digress? But that was a good digression. Is that a word? Is that?
We'll accept it.
All right, we are down to the last topic.
Yes, we are. Norman Lear has passed away at 101 years old. And like Yogi, he had some pieces of advice for how to live a long, fulfilling life.
Well, you know, just think about it. First of all, I don't know a lot of people realize this. He's a decorated war hero.
Yeah.
You know, he flew combat missions over Germany, a lot of them. And there was a show on Noctagerians. Is that what they call people in their 90s? I don't know. I call people in their 90s. And, you know, this was a couple of years ago. So he's on there. Some of the people that have passed since then, like Carl Reiner. But Mel Brooks is still alive. Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And you realize that my generation's not going to live to be 100 because we've eaten too much fast food, you know, and all these people went through the military. They fought in a war. Like, they're tougher than us. So that's the first thing, you know, I want to say about Norman Lear, that he served his country very faithfully and is a war hero. It's not much more you need to say after that. But he did live to be 101. But just think about this. In a span of just 5 years, he created the following shows: All in the Family, Sanford and Son, Maude, Good Times, One Day at a Time, and The Jeffersons. That was just 5 years of his life.
That's great. I love Sanford and Son.
The four of us couldn't create one of those shows.
Yeah.
They were groundbreaking for a number of reasons. You know, they handled topics like racism, anti-Semitism. I believe Maude was the first show where an abortion took place. So,
yes.
And, you know, would they be made today? probably not, or they'd be a much different type of show. But I was too young to watch All in the Family when it was first on. I was like 1 or 2 years old. But as I got older and you watch it, you realize this is not, the joke is on Archie. Archie is the buffoon here, you know, and you know, a lot of these characters like Archie Bunker that he created, or Fred Sanford, or George Jefferson's are blowhards, but they're always wrong. Like they're and another thing about these shows is they had the best theme songs.
Oh my God, yeah, in my head forever.
I mean, Sanford and Son is just a great groove, and I mean, is there a better TV theme song than the Jeffersons? I mean, it's phenomenal. He had it in the 74-75 television season. 5 of the top 10 shows on TV were his.
Wow.
And I don't want to shortchange One Day at a Time, because that was, you know, probably, if not the first time, one of the first times when you had a single mother raising 2 daughters, moving to a city with a creepy super in the building who had a rolled up pack of cigarettes. What?
Partridge Family.
Partridge. Well, yes, that's true.
Very true.
But they had Ruben to take care of everything, and they had a cool bus. That's why I said one of the first times. But these shows were hysterical. I mean, I put these shows on and I laugh hysterically. There's so many. Yesterday, I was watching the Sammy Davis Jr. Episode of All in the Family. And it's funny, it talks about how Archie, you know, I mentioned Archie's the idiot on the show. Sammy Davis just schools him. Like, he basically gets him to agree when he says, but you know you're no better than anybody else out there. And Archie's like, can I have your hand on it? He's like shaking his hand and agreeing with him that he's...
Yeah.
So...
And
he kisses him when he takes the photo. And I think that, you know, again, the topics were very serious at times on these shows.
They got into women's working wages, too.
Yeah. And look, Good Times, there was always something bad going on. Then James dies. And but, you know, the other thing about these shows that is great is, you know, the main characters are legendary. I mean, Archie Bunker may be the greatest character. Certainly one of the greatest.
His armchair is in the Smithsonian.
I know, I saw it.
So did I.
You know, you're around all these great documents and everything. As my wife's like, it's Archie Bunker's chair.
Yeah.
But
it's still American history. It's just the pop culture wing. Yeah.
The supporting casts on these shows are amazing. And my favorite is Mother Jefferson. I think.
Oh, so great.
Do yourself a favor, Ray. Go Google Mother Jefferson on YouTube and watch YouTube videos of like her just ripping Wheezy, because it reminds me of the dynamic between my mother and my wife. Luckily, Mother Jefferson didn't live in the apartment with the Jeffersons, but my mother lives with us. So my poor wife gets this all the time. The insults. There's also a great episode where Louis Gossett Jr., before he was big, plays an old buddy of George's who's hitting on Wheezy, like trying to kiss her, and Mother Jefferson comes at him with an umbrella and starts it.
It's hilarious.
And then you look at Sanford and Son. I mean, not only Red Fox is as funny as anybody's ever been on TV, but then you have characters like Aunt Esther, right? And now I have an Aunt Esther, and my Aunt Esther is lovely. But on this show, Aunt Esther was bad. You know, just the watch it suckers and the fighting with Fred all the time.
These are all the shows that, like, when I would get up in the morning, like before elementary school. I mean, we're talking like 5:30, 6 a.m. waiting for the bus. These are the shows I used to watch, like while I was eating like my cereal in the morning. So these are great.
That explains a lot, Hannah.
You know, thank you. I'd like to think that you mean I'm well-rounded.
Sure, let's go with that. And even the other ones like Grady, Bubba, Rollo is a great character. I mean, you know, that was an era where you could make shows like that. And he did never stop working. And I think that was that generation's thing, like retirement. What do I want to do that for?
Yeah.
And he had a very long career and did a lot of amazing things. And, you know, it's a great American story. It really is. And it was a time where TV got, especially comedies, got a lot edgier and talked about things you wouldn't talk about in a comedy back then. You know, comedy is supposed to be like the Dick Van Dyke Show or stuff like that.
Three Stooges.
Right. Well, that's still funny.
Yeah,
but
that'll never not be.
They were tackling the really serious issues of the day and doing it with humor, and it was just brilliant. So I think we're done. But I do have one announcement. Next week's show, we haven't had a guest yet. we're going to have our first guest. My good buddy, Vince Rocco, is going to be here.
I'm very excited.
Fellow podcaster, who has a really big show, as Ed Sullivan would say, a really big show. And he's had me on his show a lot, so we're going to have him on, and we're really looking forward to that.
Yes, this will be a star-studded crossover.
Yes, we got to be at our best now, and I'll wear.
I'm really looking forward to it.
I'll wear my best shirt, and we'll have Vince's cups out for that episode.
Okay.
So we can pay him tribute. He's been very nice and giving. So make sure you tune in for that, and for Hannah and Lena and Ray.
Yes.
Don't forget to subscribe. We have a network now. More Mastery of Real Estate. More. How do you like it? How do you like it? Ray used to dance to that song in the 70s. Lena still dances to it now. Maybe, I don't know. It's very catchy. Subscribe, and please somebody send a comment to ctl@bhsusa.com. If my mother could figure out how to email it, she would do it, but it's not going to happen. But thanks for crossing the line with us, and we look forward to seeing you next week and you hearing us with Vince Rocco. Have a great week, everybody.